today on Beyond 6 Seconds.
And so my concept is relationship networking. And we shift from it's all about me and what I need to it's all about the relationship and how we can help each other. Mm-hmm. And so I prefer to define it as making friends. Pure and simple. We all know how to make friends. We all like making friends. So we just are making friends in different environments and in different places and with different people.
Welcome to Beyond 6 Seconds, the podcast that goes beyond the 6-second first impression to share the extraordinary stories and achievements of everyday people. I'm your host, Carolyn Keel. On today's episode, I'm speaking with Michelle Tillis Lederman. She's one of Forbes' top 25 networking experts and the author of 4 books, including the internationally known The 11 Laws of Likability and the #1 new release, The Connector's Advantage. Michelle is a connection creator and CEO of Executive Essentials, which provides customized communications and leadership programs for Fortune 500, nonprofit, university, and government clients. A former finance executive and NYU professor, Michelle is a regular in the media, appearing on NBC, CBS, Fox, NPR, The Wall Street Journal, New York Times, CNBC, and others. An accomplished speaker, trainer, author, and coach, Michelle is known for helping people work better together and advance their individual impact. Michelle, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me on.
Thrilled to have you here today. So you have many areas of expertise, including leadership, communications, and networking. How did you get the inspiration to build a business around helping people connect and build their networks?
Honestly, it was an evolution. Mm-hmm. And if I really think back to what's not really shared in my bio is that I'm a recovering CPA. Mm-hmm. I spent 10 years in finance and I had this goal, this dream, this vision of having a corner office and having a power suit and, doing it all. And I had the power suit and I had the corner office and I had a view of the New York Stock Exchange and I had 2 windows and it was as if there were bars on those windows. I was like, oh, yeah, I got everything I thought I wanted and it's not what I want. Mm. And so I didn't quite know what the next step was, but I started to explore. And what really happened was I found my calling, and I found it while kind of working in the finance industry and having the courage to say to my then boss, who was the CEO of the Tokyo branch of the bank, that I could do this. And instead of me hiring a coach to do this, let me do it. Mm. And instead of hiring a trainer to do it, let me do it. And he said, okay, but you still have to do everything else that you do. And I said, okay. And so that's how I started to do the work that I loved. But at that point, it still wasn't really visioning the business. It was realizing that there was something that I was really good at and that I really liked. But there was, right now it was still like I needed that finance salary. I was putting my husband through business school. It was, a lot of things were going on. Right. And so I just started and I stayed in finance. That conversation probably happened in 2001. Mm-hmm. And I stayed in finance through 2005. By halfway through 2005, I was kind of 2 days a week and then weaning myself off. But it was a transition. A lot of people out there are thinking about like, oh, I'd like to make that change. And what I would say is start, just don't think about it as flipping a switch of one day to the next and having this big leap and scary thing. Just start doing the stuff on the side. I was teaching at NYU at night while still full-time in finance. I had my first client was JP Morgan, and I literally just took a vacation day to teach the class. And I was very upfront with the organization I was working for. So that helped. So that's kind of how it started. But it was in that time frame when I was pregnant with my first child where I really thought about what my vision was for myself, which was I always wanted to work. I love working. It grounds me. It fulfills me. But I also wanted to be the mom who got to chaperone the class trips and had all of this flexibility to be the class mom. And I was the class mom for every single year of grammar school. Mm-hmm. Except 5th grade. I think 5th grade, I was like, I'm done. 2 kids. So it was like every year was somebody. And that meant I had to have a little more control. And that's when it started to visualize as a business.
Interesting. So it seems like quite a leap to go from finance and accounting, which seems very analytical and that deep focus on business, to your new focus, which is on communications and networking and more on the people side. But was that something that you always were passionate about, the connections and people? Or was there something about the work you did in finance that inspired you to say, no, this is the direction I want to go in?
Oh, for sure. I always say I teach all the mistakes I ever saw or made. And I made plenty and I saw plenty. As the only woman in finance, as a woman in finance, but I was the only woman on the trading floor for the bank I worked for. The only other woman on the floor was an assistant. I was the only woman on a global venture capital team back in 99, 2000. And at that point, I remember going to this global conference of the entire venture capital team. And they put my name card, at this U-shaped table all the way at the top of the U, right? Not at the base of the U, the power seat, at the top of the U. Oh. And the person sitting next to me, the only other woman in the room, was the assistant yet again. Mm-hmm. And so one of the gray-haired gentlemen came over and said, I'd like some coffee. And I was kind of looking at my notes and doing stuff. And I looked up at him and I said, I don't drink coffee, but thank you so much for offering. Back to my notes. And then as soon as he walked away, very confused, I took my name card and I moved myself to the base of the U. Oh. And so these types of little moments of, I wasn't allowed to wear pants. I wasn't allowed to have red nail polish. There was so much constriction. I had people, if they had a bad day, it didn't matter who was there. Anybody in the vicinity was going to have that bad day taken out on them. Mm-hmm. I made mistakes about giving feedback. I made somebody cry. I mean, I didn't want to do that. I didn't mean to do that, but I did do that. And I had to learn what I did wrong. So yes, absolutely. There was things that I saw in finance that made me recognize that we are not taught how to be leaders. I was managing people at the age of 22. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's nuts. I was a year out of school. And I had people who were 10 years older than me that I was managing. Mm-hmm. And they were very good about it because I'm like, why would you listen to me? Mm-hmm. But all of these things, we weren't supporting people to be able to do the roles that they were meant to do in a way that made people want to do them and to do them to the best of their ability. And so I started to see all these problems. And that's where it started and it evolved. I used to be that person who had the chip on her shoulder. I mean, I was a woman in finance. We had to have a really thick skin. So I was always kind of gearing for the fight. I would go and show me your manager. I want to escalate this and all of that stuff that doesn't work. And it took me learning what does work to inspire me to say, oh, let me save you from me. Don't be me. Let me teach you what really does work.
That's such a great point because as you mentioned, you were managing people at a very young age. And so many leaders really don't get any kind of leadership training before they start leading. Maybe they get it 10 or 15 years into their careers, but it's such a common phenomenon that we put people in leadership positions and we really don't teach them how to be leaders a lot of the time. So yeah, I think the work that you're doing is really critical to help people understand this is how you work with people, this is how you develop people, and how it ties to the business as well.
And it's a really hard shift to make because how we're evaluated as we climb the ladder changes. And it's a hard adjustment to say my evaluation is not based on my work product. I don't have control over everything because my evaluation is now based on the results I get with and through other people. Mm-hmm. And I don't have as much control. And that's scary. And these are different skills that I need. That phrase, what got you here won't get you there. It's a real mental shift about how I should be allocating my time and what skills I need to excel. And that is something I like to help people guide them through.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Not only are results dependent on the actions and the success of other people, but also our own career development becomes more and more dependent upon the relationships that we build and who knows us and who thinks of us when the decisions are being made and we're not in the room as they often are. So relationships are key.
Oh, relationships are everything.
Yep.
I do a talk called Get Known, Get Connected, Get Ahead. And I actually talk about the types of relationships that we want and need. And, this applies mainly to probably that corporate America listener. But honestly, even the entrepreneurs that are listening out there, it matters that we think about these roles that we need in our life. And so I talk about 6 main roles: mentors and followers, mm-hmm. right? So whether you're internal or your own company, I have mentors. Everybody needs mentors. But you also need followers because if people don't want to work with you and work for you, then you can't keep climbing. So you need to generate a following. And that's like, think about those people that like follow their bosses to the next job because they work so well together. Mm-hmm. That's what I mean by following. You need sounding boards and confidants. And those are different. Sounding boards is somebody who has enough knowledge to be able to give you a reflection on your approach or the politics of something. So a sounding board tends to be somebody who is industry or organization. A confidant doesn't necessarily need to be industry or organization, but that's a really trusted person. And then there's champions and cheerleaders. And the cheerleaders are those people that give you that pep talk when you need it, internal or external. Your champions need to tend to be people who actually can make a difference for you to clear your path. Whether it is a champion who is introducing you to the right people for funding, for whatever it might be, or it's a champion who is at the table who is going to be fighting for you to get that promotion.
Yeah, that's a really interesting way to think about it. Very holistic. I think a lot of times people get stuck on mentorship and looking for mentors, but that's really just a small piece of the puzzle when it comes to relationships.
Absolutely. And people often talk about your advisory board. Mm-hmm. If you think about it in a way, these are just different people on your advisory board.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that you had made the transition from your corporate accounting and finance career over to the work that you do now with connection and leadership and networking. How did you learn the methodologies and the advice and the guidance that you share with others? Was it trial and error based on your experiences, or did you study certain things? How did that come about?
All of the above. So the truth is, you said, how does somebody go from all this left brain stuff to all this right brain stuff? I've always been both because I was an accounting major, but I was a writing and a communications minor. So I loved the writing and the communications, but I didn't see the career in it. And we often make our decisions based on an anecdote to something that's happened that we don't want to happen again, right? So for me, it was, I did not grow up with financial security. And I really wanted financial security. And being a teacher didn't sound like that was going to give me financial security. So I said, well, finance will do that. Right. And that's where I'm going to go. I'm good at that. Let's go there. But I still had this love and passion for teaching, for writing, for communications. And so I did educate myself there. And I was always that person who loved doing those things. So that would be my volunteer aspects of life, where I would actually go back to my university and I would recruit and I would do mock interviews. I actually got a group together and we did interview and resume training for people in shelters because I just had a passion for it.
Sure.
And so it does take time to build those skills. And I just believed in continuous learning. And so I got myself on the faculty of the American Management Association. And when you're on the faculty of the American Management Association, you get to take classes.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's a great organization.
Yes. And so when I was working for the bank and I said, I can do this. And he said, okay, what he would do is actually send me to training. So he's like, I want an interviewing class, go take a class at AMA and then figure out to teach us here. I want project management. I want performance management. I want public speaking. And so he would just send me for training and training and training. And then I would design courses and I would teach them in New York and Tokyo for the branch. Wow. So I just stayed in this world of continuously taking information in. And then I developed some of my own models. You learn, you observe, and it's, and here I am.
That's great. So you really knew what your skills and your passions were. And, you were able to look for opportunities, find opportunities any way that you could to keep practicing those. So even though you were primarily on the finance side, trying to pursue that career at first, you were still finding those opportunities to practice your writing passion and your communications and your abilities to connect with people. And it seems like over time that as you built that experience more and more, it really actually led to the career that you have right now. I think people kind of forget, they think they have to pick something practical over their passions, but really you can still find ways to practice what you really care about, and you never know when it's going to eventually evolve into something new.
I agree with you completely, except for the part where you made it sound like I actually knew what the hell I was doing. Because I didn't have that clarity. I didn't say, oh, this is my passion, I'm going to go fulfill it this way. In hindsight, we can say those things.
Right.
And in hindsight, I can tell people those things. But in the moment, it was, oh, something fell in my lap. And oh, yeah, I'd be happy to do that. And oh, I'll raise my hand because that sounds like fun and that's way better than this. And it wasn't so strategic and it wasn't so, I didn't have this clarity at that time. I got the clarity literally on that trip to Tokyo when I hired a coach to go with me to prepare the bankers and managers and traders of the bank to report to this new CEO. And I paid her a ton of money. Mm-hmm. Obviously the bank paid her, right. But I was thinking, I'm like, I did everything she did and then some, and I was good at it and I enjoyed it. And that's when that whole conversation happened. And so that was my moment of clarity. I didn't actually know that there was something that could not just tap into something that I loved, but that I was also good at and that it was also financially viable. So I didn't know where those lines crossed. And when I found them, I got clarity. But up until that point, I was just throwing darts.
Yeah. I think a lot of us do that. And as much as I am a fan of having a plan and having goals to work towards, in reality, the world is changing so quickly, and there's, the world of work is changing. There's different types of jobs and coming up and different technologies that you can't necessarily predict exactly what your whole career path is going to be. So I think being open to having those opportunities that come into your lap, to raising your hand for things that sound interesting, that can, even if you don't know that you're positioning yourself for something new, I think that's really great. And just having that mindset of being a lifelong learner is so important, especially these days.
And it's hard. There's so much learning out there, especially now. We are such a content-rich society in that everybody is producing content. Mm-hmm. It's very easy to produce content, whether it's a blog or a podcast or a book, or there's less barrier to producing content, and there's YouTube and video. So it's hard to figure out, there's only so much time in a day. You can only take in so much, but to just keep taking in at some levels always keeps us on our toes.
Yeah, definitely. So then what made you make the decision to start your own business as opposed to going to another industry to pursue, communications or coaching? What was it that said, no, I'm going to go into business for myself and do this type of coaching?
When I started the business, there wasn't clarity on all the service lines. I was, again, even though it was now in this industry that I cared about, I really viewed it as a practice. I didn't view it as a business at first. It was, here is what I believe. Design your ideal. And what design your ideal means is, what do you need your lifestyle to be? What do you need your salary to be? And what type of work do you want to be doing? And so lifestyle was, I wanted to have that flexibility to be a working mom. I wasn't even married when some of this started, Mm-hmm. But by 2005, when I really took the leap, I was pregnant with my first child. And so it was, what does this need to look like? And so I just started doing the work. I didn't know that there was companies that I could get a job with to do this. I didn't have, you make it sound like I knew what I was doing.
Well, it all makes sense in retrospect, of course.
I do understand what I did was I built foundation. So while I was still in finance, I said, okay, well, I'm going to get work from the American Management Association. I'm going to get work from Rutgers Executive Education. I am now an adjunct at NYU. And now I had enough income from the work that I loved doing to be able to say, okay, I don't need to lean on my finance salary anymore. I'm willing to take that switch. Now I can actually flip the switch because it wasn't on off. It was dim to bright. And, as the light got brighter, meaning the financial contribution of that work became greater in terms of what was coming into me, it was easier to take that leap and then say, okay, well, I'm in this practice and I'm able to sustain myself on the work I like, and yes, I'm making less money. Of course, you leave finance, you're going to make less money. It wasn't until I wrote my first book, and 2011 is probably when it really started becoming more than a practice. And when you think of a practice, you think about, you hang out your shingle and you say, I'm open for business, and you get your clients and you do your work, and that's that. A business is when you have leverage. And for me, that's the difference. I might have been in business for myself, but I thought of it as a practice. I'm practicing my work. When I started to create leverage in the business, that's when it became a business. That's when there were other people that were relying on me for part of their income. And I never necessarily wanted that, but all of a sudden you have it and you're like, I'm on vacation. I'm still making money. That's cool.
Oh, yeah, that's a really interesting distinction. And I'm interested in how you evolved it from being a practice to having that leverage where you're making that money and you're not literally just getting paid, quote unquote, by the hour, that you can actually make money from. And I'm guessing that the books probably are a big part of that. Is that correct?
There was two major things that happened in 2011. My first book came out. And so I started moving from just being a trainer and a coach, which is where a lot of my work was, to being a keynote speaker. And I started doing main stage work. And that part of my business has grown significantly with each book. The other thing that happened was I got a contract with the city of New York. And in that time between 2005, when I really left finance, and 2011, when the first book came out, I had 2 children. I put my husband through business school, he finished that. And I started having repeat clients. I started getting referrals. I wasn't having to ask for every single piece of business because the business was coming. So when I was invited to apply for this RFP with the city of New York, I already knew the answer was going to be yes, because they already wanted me. And so it was just a matter of paperwork. A lot of paperwork, a lot of hoops, but I knew that it would result in work. And so I did that. And what happened was it didn't result in a huge amount of work right away, but it was enough for me to pull 1 or 2 or 3 other trainers and give them a little bit of work and realize hey, there's more work coming in than I can even take on. So great, I have a little leverage. And then what happened was we got a reputation. And here's what happens. Everything's about connection and relationship. I built relationships with these clients. They trusted my design. They trusted my team. And I have agencies in New York City that will only use my firm. And we became the most sought after vendor for New York City government for the last 4 to 5 years.
Wow. Awesome.
And the way I know that is that our annual, revenue from the government was 4 times greater than the next highest vendor.
Wow.
So that's when it really evolved, because now you have a volume of work that there's no possibility for one person. And so it becomes, I need to recruit, I need to train, I need to have processes in place, right? And so demand exceeded the supply, and that's when you create leverage.
Wow. That's incredible. I think that's where a lot of entrepreneurs really want to evolve their business. Ideally, you want to be able to have so much work and have the resources to share that work and work with other, whether it be trainers or coaches or just other people in your business to grow in that way. So that's really exciting. Wow. Obviously, this speaks even more to the importance of building relationships in business and in life in general. Did you sort of use the same principles of networking and relationship building as you built your own business, the same ones that you also share with other people for their own careers?
Absolutely. I believe that real relationships lead to real results. And I always knew I would have a client for a really long time when those lines got blurred. There's one client that I had, and I met her at a neighborhood function. We had just moved to New Jersey, and somebody said, "Oh, you need to meet her." And I met her and I became best friends. She became a client. Our kids were the same age. Then she left her firm and she started working for me. And then she got another job and she became a client again. And then she left that job and started working for me.
Wow, yeah.
And I know she leaves me again, she'll become a client again because she knows what we do. I have had clients that I knew them back. Morgan Stanley was one of my earlier clients. And there was somebody in my class at Morgan Stanley 15 years ago that I am still friends with to this day. And it wasn't that we didn't have breaks in that contact, but then all of a sudden she was at Citibank and I was training at Citibank and she was there again. And I was like, oh my God, I haven't seen you in years. And then she went to Comcast and she tried to bring me there. And then she went to Madison Square Garden and she brought me there. And then she went to Cox Communications and she brought me there. And
fantastic.
And so that's what happens is sometimes you don't keep the client in terms of the company, but you keep the client in terms of the person because that's where the relationship exists. And I'll tell you, when she left Madison Square Garden, I did still do some work because there were still some people there. But as those people turned over, the work became less because the work is coming from the relationship and not from the organization.
Wow. Yeah. And really interesting way to think about it. But yeah, it makes absolute sense. Just like people follow their bosses sometimes from job to job. It's, a lot of times when people move from job to job, they bring the consultants and the trusted advisors along with them. Fantastic. So yeah, would love if you could share some of your networking advice with us. I know you have quite a lot of it. You've written a lot of books on this topic. Actually, one I wanted to ask you about that I had heard you speaking about on a previous show was the importance of having a clear ask when you're networking. Can you talk a little bit about what that means and when it's appropriate to state an ask in a relationship?
That's a great question. And we can talk about the different types of asks. Mm-hmm. So my latest book is called The Connector's Advantage. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I talk about are the 7 mindsets of a connector. So we've been talking about the benefits of relationships. And at the top line, faster, easier, better. Mm-hmm. That's the advantage. Faster, easier, better results as a connector. And so when we think about the mindsets of a connector, one of the mindsets is having a clear vision. And as you said, having a clear ask. Mm-hmm. So they go hand in hand, but they're not the same. So having a clear vision is knowing what you're working on mm-hmm. and knowing what you're trying to accomplish. So for example, right now, and it changes, but right now my vision is to have the Connector's Advantage be well-known, household name, do what the 11 Laws of Likability did, mm-hmm. where I saw people on the train reading my book, which was really cool. And I once saw somebody on a beach reading my book, which was really cool. So that's awesome. I want to do that for this book. Mm-hmm. So there's my vision. And then it's how do I get there? So how do I think I'm going to accomplish that? Well, I need more reviews on Amazon. And so that's a quantitative goal. And so then there's an ask. So when somebody emails me and says, I just read your book and I liked it and this is what I did, I will respond back thanking them and saying, if you have the time, I would appreciate an honest review on Amazon. And the if you have the time piece is what I call the opt-out ask. And when you give an opt-out ask, you make it easy and okay for somebody to say no. Now, of course, I want them to say yes, but I don't want them to feel pressured to say yes. And I don't want them to feel uncomfortable if they say no. So that's a way to make an ask. And that was an ask that is made very early, right? Typically, you want to make an ask once you have already added value. Now, you could say, I added value by her reading my book, but I like to add a more personal, connected value. If I do something for someone, which is the way in which I think and the way in which I approach relationships is how can I be helpful? How can I add value? Even if I can't do it right away, how can I let them know that that is something I think about and that I'm available for? And then oftentimes when you put that out there, people will reciprocate in saying, well, what are you working on? Or how can I help you? And that is an invitation to make an ask. But you want to be careful of not, what does Ivan Misner say? Ivan Misner, who's the founder of BNI, and he wrote the foreword to the book. He says, do not propose on the first date, right? And that's a really great analogy because I've had people ask me for things before I've even met them. Like I've had people connect with me on LinkedIn and say, hey, help me find a job. Yeah. And here's my resume. Can you tell me what you think? Who are you?
Right.
Like, it's a little dumbfounding when things like that happen. But there are other people who will engage with me on social media and we've never met in person. And I actually called them out in the book because I know their names and they've commented, they've shared, they've posted, they've tagged, they've had conversations with me virtually. And if Sean ever does call me and say, can you help me? I'm going to say yes. Even though we've never met. Yeah. So it's really about understanding where your relationship is in that moment and is it appropriate? And then understanding, and this is in the book, I gave you one of the asks, but there's a lot of different types of asks that make it more palatable to both ask and to be able to give a good response.
Wow. Yeah, that's great advice. I think, when people are out networking, I think a lot of people just have no idea how to do it. And they're either asking for something way too big, way too early in the relationship because they think that's like the go-getter attitude, like the hard pitch sales attitude, or they're not asking anything at all because they just don't know how people can help them or what to do. So I think that having those asks outlined and when it's appropriate and what they look like will be really helpful for people as they build their relationships.
I honestly always say that networking is a horrible word. It has the word work in it. Who wants to do that? But I tried to change the vernacular. My publisher said I had to have the word networking in for SEO, so we left it in the title, but I added the word relationship. And so my concept is relationship networking. And we shift our thinking from short-term to long-term, from talking about work to talking about anything. And we shift from it's all about me and what I need to it's all about the relationship and how we can help each other. And so I prefer to define it as making friends, pure and simple. We all know how to make friends. We all like making friends. So we just are making friends in different environments and in different places and with different people.
Yeah, it really is a more natural, comfortable feeling when you think of it as literally making friends and how can we mutually help each other as opposed to the sort of traditional thoughts of networking, which I know that word gives a lot of people the Stevies and gets them nervous. So I think rethinking it is really a good way to go. Definitely. And another piece of networking advice that you also talk about that I was interested in is that you have specific advice or tips for people who are on the more introverted side. And it's my opinion that introverts can be absolutely phenomenal relationship builders. I think sometimes we either have a different view of what that should look like, or it can be intimidating at first. But I'm curious, what is your advice or what are your views on ways that introverts can use their strengths to build good relationships?
I think some of the best networkers I know are introverts. And the first thing I would say is that you need to let go of what you think it should look like and recognize what it should look like for you. Mm-hmm. In both of my books, The 11 Laws of Likability and The Connector's Advantage, I have call outs for the introvert because one is called Good News for the Introvert and the other one's called The Introvert's Edge. Mm-hmm. And I truly believe introverts actually have an edge when it comes to connection because introverts connect better in the one-on-one, but that's where connection forms. Mm-hmm. So you don't have to be the life of the party and you don't have to be gregarious and outgoing and social to connect in a one-on-one. You are better as listeners, and to be able to listen and to respond puts a person at ease and increases mood memory. And so there's all these attributes that introverts have that they bring to the table naturally that are the core of connection.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think the ability to really listen to people when they're speaking to you and really hear what they're saying it's a great gift to people because I feel like in this world, a lot of us just are so distracted that we're not really listening or we're just thinking of what's the next thing we're going to say. So I think introverts are really good at that as well. And that helps build those strong relationships and make people feel understood.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Yeah. Michelle, I think we're nearing the end of our time already on our conversation. So a couple more questions. First of all, how can people get in touch with you if they want to learn more about your business and your books?
Well, I love when people reach out to me and I love when they tell me how they found me. So the best place to start is my website, which is Michelle with 2 L's, Tillis, Tillis, Lederman, Lederman.com. And from there, it is very easy to find all the other ways to connect. LinkedIn is my favorite place, but you can find me on Twitter, on Instagram, on Facebook. And by the way, the Facebook, it's my professional page that you follow or like or something. Mm-hmm. I don't want everyone seeing my hair in the 80s. It's not pretty. And I have a YouTube channel. So I do these Success Shorty videos. There is in your show notes, I know you're going to give a link to my giveaway. I give away some assessments and some chapters of the books and some video series and all this stuff because I like to add value. And then you'll be joining my weekly newsletter. And that's a really great way to get these tips right into your inbox. And sometimes they're a short blog and sometimes it's a video and sometimes it's access to some online programs. And who knows, I just try to always add value. And if you want to find my books, well, obviously they're on Amazon, but you can go to theconnectorsadvantage.com. And I have a BOGO, which in my case means buy one, gift one, because I think that's a great way to connect with somebody is giving them the gift of connection through the book. So I have some extra things I give away if people buy two.
Wonderful. So yeah, I am going to put those links to your website, the different ways to connect with you and to your giveaway. And that'll be in the show notes so that people can access that easily from there. Wonderful. Thank you so much. That's awesome.
I hope I hear from tons of people.
Yes. And tell Michelle you heard her on the Beyond 6 Seconds podcast. Yeah, I definitely encourage everyone to look at the resources and sign up for the newsletter and take advantage of the free gift on Michelle's website. Fantastic. So, Michelle, it was such a pleasure to talk with you today. As we close out, is there anything else that you'd like our listeners to know or anything that they can help or support you with?
Well, if you read the books, I always appreciate an honest review on Amazon. There's that ask.
Yeah, exactly.
But here's what I would say is if I can help you, if there's a topic that you want to hear about, definitely send me a note. I'm always thinking about what people are curious about. And that's how I generate the content is trying to answer your questions and your concerns. And then my last thing is don't network for need or network for now. really think about networking for life, because the connections that you build because you want to and because you get to, those are the ones that are going to stay with you and sustain you.
Great observation and great advice. Thanks again, Michelle.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Thanks for listening to Beyond 6 Seconds. Please help us spread the word about this podcast. Share it with a friend, give us a shout out on your social media, or write a review on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player. You can find all of our episodes on our website, www.beyond6seconds.com. Until next time.